Hey, welcome back. This is section 3.3 covering loops. In the last section, we covered variables, a couple tips and tricks, and why they're important to your development and your automation tasks. In this section, we'll be covering loops, and if you're following along, you can open up section 3 in the learning objectives, and it's section 2 on my computer, but it's section 3 on the website, and open up the folder called loops.py. So now that we have it open on our Sublime text, we can see the code from the previous section variables, and here we have a loop, a for loop. So the formal definition of a loop is a sequence of instructions that is continuously repeated until a certain condition is reached. In other words, it is a series of commands that are repeated until you reach a point where it can stop. So for example, in real life, you want to, if you have an employee, you want this employee to keep on working until a specified time or until they achieve a certain task. Similarly to that, you have rent due every month, and then you have around 30 days to work. Every day you must do work until you reach the point where you have enough money to pay rent. That is another example of a loop in real life. For the days in a certain month until rent is paid, then continue working. So so loops are in everyday life as well as translated to a computer. So in this case, in Python there are two kinds of loops. Certain languages have three: a for, a while, and some languages have a do while. In Python, while loops are more than enough. So in this example, I've already created a loop for you guys called using a for loop, and this will count I, which is initialized as a variable. Remember, variables are labels, and inside of a range 0 to 6. So what this range function actually does, if we print it, is create an array for you of the numbers in the two between the two numbers that you put in. So this is actually called a function call, which we'll cover in a later section. So if we print this out, you can see that it prints out 0 to 6. We can remove this and just tell it to pass, which basically means ignore this. So you can see the range is 0 to 6. Remember, computers start counting from 0, opposed to human beings who start counting from 1. So over here, we can see that this loop will iterate 6 times because what this loop basically translates to is for until I reaches reaches a number 6, then repeat this sequence and increase I by 1 every loop. So this is basically what this is equal to, the English version. So a more succinct way to do that on a computer is for I in range 0 to 6, print this is a loop. And then we can add I is I to sort of show that this is true and this is what's happening. So we can't concatenate a integer and a string, which basically means that these are two different types. Just like you can't mix currencies in real life. If you have US dollars, you can't use it in China. If you have Chinese yuan, you can't use it in India. The same thing, you have to convert it. So strings and integers are basically two different currencies. So here we can see this is a loop 0 up to this is a loop 5. As you can see, this loop is iterating once every time, and it's running 6 times. So let's go to another example where we're using a while loop. So this is basically the same thing. This is going to be under loops2.py, and we're going to be doing the same thing as we did before, just in a little bit more of a verbose or complicated way of doing it, which isn't always the best way. So this is, if we take the print from before, this is basically the same thing. Basically, in English, this is trying to say while I is less than 5, then run this code. It's very straightforward. It's much more straightforward than the for loop, but the for loop just gets more done in a short, in less lines, which as you get better, you'll find a lot of value in that. So let's run this loop 3. You can see it's doing the same thing. In this case, since we moved the print below the I, we're missing the first loop. So you actually don't count up from 0, but if we run it again, it counts up to 5. In the previous section, we counted up to 6. There we go. 0. This is a loop I is 0. This is a loop I is 1, and all the way up to 5. So those are 2 examples of loops. And Python actually has a nice way to do loops. You can use, if your loop is an array, then you can actually do a for in loop, which basically is looking at every item in that list and then running the code on that item. So if we open up loops3.py, we can see the sales data from the variable lesson, and then we're using a for in loop to look at every sale in the sales data and then printing the sale on the screen. So we can run that, and we can see that we're printing every item. If we want to, this looks very similar to what it was before, so I'm going to add a new line just to separate it, to make it a little bit different, and there we go. You see every line is separated now. So basically in English, this is saying, so this is translated to code as for I in range 0 to length sales data. So it's going between 0 and all the items in the sales data, and then it's using that to set sale equal to sales data I. So that's basically what this line translates to in a for loop into a for loop, and then the for loop is how it worked before. So that covers loops in this section, and next we're going to be moving on to functions.